Welcome back to CentralCoastRadio.com. I'm your host Kyle, and I'm going to be talking about the latest horror film out in cinemas at the moment, Thanksgiving. Uh, how did the voice go in that trailer from Grindhouse back in 2007? It was in the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. The fourth Thursday of November is the most celebrated day of the year. The table is set, the festivities have begun, and Thanksgiving is in full swing. I know I can't really do it. As families gather and friends celebrate, others are called into work at Right Mart, where Black Friday sales start on Thursday. Now, as a mob of angry shoppers, desperate for a bargain, gather outside, things turn deadly, and a riot breaks out as they rush the store. And in the aftermath, several innocent people are left dead, mutilated, or both. And a year later, and for the most of the people in Plymouth, it's like the tragedy never happened. Nobody was charged, and the store owner, Thomas Wright, played by Rick Hoffman, spurred on by his new wife, Kathleen, played by Karen Cliche. I think that's. I mean, sounds like a joke name, but that is the actress's name. Um, they plan an even bigger sale this year, but his daughter Jessica, played by Nell Verlicu, feels guilty as, in many ways, the actions of her and her friends caused that riot. But soon vengeance comes knocking, and an axe wielding stranger in a John Carver mask, John Carver being Plymouth's first governor and a Thanksgiving figurehead, this stranger makes his presence known. So, as brutal killings and disappearances begin to rack up, it's clear that this is personal. Local sheriff Newland, played by Patrick Dempsey, investigates as Jessica and her friends wonder who'll be carved up next. But these turkeys are already stuffed because this Thanksgiving there will be no leftovers. Now, the movie comes from splatter film maestro Eli Roth, and yeah, this is a new, fresh slasher, which is interesting because, like Robert Rodriguez's Machete film from quite a few years back, this movie is actually based upon a mock trailer which Eli Roth directed for as part of like a special guest kind of short film that played in between the Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino double feature novelty film Grindhouse back from 2007. There was a few fake trailers that were made for that movie by different directors like Rob Zombie, Eli Roth, Edgar Wright was another one. So yeah, this film is actually based on one of those trailers, the one that Eli Roth did, and well, after finding some success with very different types of movies, Eli Roth makes his triumphant return here to the world of uh, the ultra violent films which he made in his youth. Now, I was a little trepidatious about this film at first, despite being a fan of all of Eli Roth's movies and being a fan of that 2007 trailer within Grindhouse. Because in the case of Robert Rodriguez's movie Machete, which again based on one of those trailers, that in that case, attempting to expand a 3 minute joke into a full length feature resulted in a really choppy and aimless movie. But Thanksgiving feels much more imaginative and inspired by its original format than simply being an extension of it. Almost like this is a remake of the film that trailer was advertising. I think that's actually how they went about making this one, rather than okay, how are we going to incorporate the footage that we filmed 15 years ago into a movie that we're making now? they went into it thinking, okay, we'll make this as if it's a remake of that movie, and it actually makes the film work. The story walks a fine line between satirizing the genre of slasher films while still engaging in the schlocky aspects of it. Uh, like early on, especially the film is silly but engaging as it introduces its large roster of characters, and it teases several as potential killers in disguise, or killers not in disguise, as it as it probably should more be. Uh, with many other slasher films, the characters kind of begin and end at just being stereotypes. They're just there to fill a specific role. But in Thanksgiving's case, the characters actually evolve. Uh, there's characters that start off as just being these one note characters with just very basic personalities, but they actually grow to be likable over the course of the film. And there's character dynamics and clashings of personalities which evolve into friendships. And it was actually kind of surprising to see that in a slasher film like this, because they didn't need to do that, or Eli Roth didn't need to do that with his characters, but I really appreciated it, and I think it kind of shows that Roth has grown as a filmmaker from the guy who made Hostel and Cabin Fever and those kind of movies, which are still very enjoyable. But yeah, there's a lot more personality, a lot more character in this film, even though it is kind of just a slasher film. And there's also plenty of red herrings and clever moments to keep the audience guessing and never bored. Now, having said that, that really does seem to only last for so long, however, because the film's latter half, the second half of the film, really kind of feels undercooked, to use a pun. There's many plot threads and uh, characters who just disappear, for either for large periods of time, or in some cases they just disappear and they're never seen or heard from again. In some ways, this helps the mystery aspect of the movie. Kind of, you're not sure who the killer is, but I was still kind of I was still left disappointed because the film, it wasn't overall as clever as it showed the promise of being at the beginning. That's that's really what I'm trying to say here. It was it had the promise of being a much more intelligent, smart slasher film in the same vein as Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer, but it kind of uh, doesn't quite stick the landing, unfortunately. But of course, that said, most audiences aren't going to be watching this movie for the writing or the characters. They're going to be watching it for the glorious hard R ultra violence. And in some ways, the movie's actually a little bit more tame than the 2007 trailer, but it's still not for the faint of heart. You can tell that Eli Roth is really in his element when just showering the audience with buckets of blood and guts, just constantly one-upping himself with every new victim who gets slaughtered. And you can't help but smile watching it because just like his friend Quentin Tarantino would say, it's just so much fun. So Thanksgiving is really, hopefully, the start of a brand new slasher franchise. It's an incredibly violent, completely over the top film, and yet it's still surprisingly intelligent in places. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, and unfortunately, you'll be most likely recognizing many scenes from other movies. In some cases, often these scenes were done better in other movies, but it's as gory, shocking, and fun of an experience as I would expect from the filmmaker who brought us Hostel and Cabin Fever. So I'm going to give this movie 4 out of 5. I did really enjoy it. I highly recommend checking it out. And it should be in cinemas right now. You're listening to CentralCoastRadio.com, and we'll be back right after this.